Hey, what's going on everyone? It's Stranger here and welcome to another YouTube music production video. And in today's video, we're going to be doing part 3 of making a liquid drum and bass track. And in particular, we're going to be writing a pad. So pads are generally a layer of sustained notes and they tend to fill the atmosphere of a track. So essentially, they give the track a little more emotion. Pads are generally played by instruments that can play longer notes such as strings and synthesizers, and they're usually played as chords. So that means we're gonna have to get into some really basic music theory. So if you already have music theory, then you can skip right ahead to how we design the pad. But for those that don't have any music theory, we're gonna show you a few tricks on how you get around that so you can write some chords. So let's open up Serum here and make sure you have a sawtooth here. And we're just going to stick with the basic waveform right now. And once we have the chords written, then we're going to design the sound. The only step I'd like you guys to make is just to move the octave 2 octaves up. So just increase this parameter so you get that +2. The reason is we're going to be using the bass line to model our chord. So that's a trick I like to use is once you have a bass line written, then it's really easy to model a chord over the same progression as that bass line. So remember this bass line that we wrote in the previous lesson. In the last video, I said that even though my first note is not on A, it's still in the key of A. That's partly true, but I also found that this particular bass line worked a little better in the key of E minor. So just keep in mind that this isn't actually A minor. It could be, but in terms of what we're going to write, it will work a lot better with E minor. So I'm just going to copy this clip and go over here and paste it. And I'm going to enable this clip and play it. So what I did here is I folded my keyboard to only show the white keys. If I unfold it, then it shows all the keys on my keyboard. But since we're going to be working with the key of A minor, which is all the white keys, it'll help if we can hide all the black keys so we can see where the notes should fall a little more easily. And I did that simply by going right before the clip, so before the first beat, and I just entered a note on every white key here, and then I folded it. So these notes don't actually play because my loop starts at 1. So folding those black notes help because then it'll help us identify our notes when we start layering a chord. So a trick I like to use is to transpose your bass if it's not in the key of A and you only know the A minor scale, then move that melody so it's on the A scale. So what I'm going to do is select these notes and you notice it's on E right now. We're going to move this up to A. Okay, so now it's an A minor, so it's a lot easier to write a chord now. And a simple trick to write a chord is to stack notes on top of the bass line. So the very basic chord to learn are the triads. And there's major and minor triads. And simply the major triads sound a little more happier. The minor triads sound a little more moodier. Essentially, it's the same methodology to write either triads. So you have the bass note, and then you're going to layer 2 more notes on top of it, skipping every other white note. Okay, so I'm going to click on the first note, hold Control, and click and drag to copy it. So now I have the second note. I skipped that second white note, and I copied it to the third white note. And then I'm going to skip the fourth white note, and then move it up to the fifth white note. So now I have 1, 2, 3. So notice I have 1 and then skip 2. I have 3, skip 4, and then I have 5. So that's a minor triad. Alright, so now we can follow the same step for the remaining bass notes. I'm going to click, drag here, and then here. And then click, drag here, and then here. and then click, drag here and here, click, drag here and here. So we can make this a little more complex. For liquid drum and bass, we tend to use 7th chords or 9th chords. Essentially what a 7th is that you add a 7th note. So notice we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 6, this is 7, this is 8, and 9. So simply we add a 7th, and here. Okay, and then we can make it even more complex if you like. We can add a 9th to it. So it's the same methodology. Okay, so we have our chord written now, so we can now move directly into Serum and start designing this pad. The first step is to shave off some of those high ends. So I'm going to turn on the filter and then adjust the cutoff. Okay. Now you can try the different low pass filters. As you increase the poles, which is the number here, you get a more rounder, smoother sound. I like also adding a bit of resonance. It adds a bit of fatness and roundness to that filter as well. You can also increase some drive for fatness. The signal is starting to break up because it's playing so loud. There's 5 notes playing together, so you might have to turn down the master here. Maybe increase some fat. Okay, the next step is going to envelope 2, and then assigning this to the cutoff. Let's add some attack to that filter so it kind of sweeps up. So we're going to increase the attack of envelope 2. And you notice there's a visual cue here showing the envelope move up. Showing that pad filter up. Okay, so now there's some movement, but now we had to adjust the cutoff so it doesn't go all the way up to the maximum cutoff frequency. So we're going to adjust the cutoff frequency and then also adjust the amount here by clicking and dragging down or up this horseshoe icon. I liken that allows some of the chords to cut through during the initial start of the note. And then also has some movement. Another trick is to add an LFO to the cutoff as well. So click LFO 1, drag that crosshair over the cutoff, and then adjust the LFO amount. Okay, you don't want it to go all the way up like this. Again, now we might have to adjust the cutoff to compensate for that LFO going up and down. So I'm going to drag that cutoff and maybe bring it down. You can also play with the rate. We're going to stick with quarter notes. You can also turn off the BPM so it's not linked to the BPM of the track, and that might give it some more funk. Now we're going to go into the effects section and then add some reverb and some EQ. Okay, so let's play this with the bass line and the drums to see how it's turning out so far. I actually have the key of E minor bass triggered, and we actually don't want that. We want the key of A minor. So you either could go in and just move this up to A minor like we did before, or simply just trigger this one here. Okay, now I'm gonna turn on my drums. Maybe bring down those pads, it is a bit loud. Okay, I'm gonna go into my pads and make some additional adjustments. A cool thing to do with pads is to increase the unison mode to add some fatness to that pad. So watch as I increase it. I like around 6. Now this is up to personal choice, but if you want the pad to play consistently every time you hit that note, then bring this random knob all the way down to 0. And actually I do like that randomness. It keeps that pad sounding a little more fatter, so I'm gonna keep that up. Now you can also use different waveforms for the pad. You can also try the other basic shapes here. So that's with a sine wave. Here's another sawtooth. Here's a triangle. Here's a square. Pulse wave. That one gets a bit of distortion. Personally, I like using the sawtooth for this kind of sound. And then another step is to layer another oscillator on top of that basic shape. So you can turn on oscillator B and perhaps use something a little more complex, such as the spectral waveforms. And then make sure to send that to the filter, otherwise you're going to hear all the frequencies of that oscillator. So turn on B here. There we go. And ensure that's also 2 octaves up. You could also try increasing the unison of that oscillator as well. So now we're getting a very fat pad. You might also try adjusting the oscillator maybe an octave higher. That might give you some additional texture to that pad. You might even go -1. Sometimes that doesn't work because then you start to get some of those low frequencies. But there's actually another trick to combat that. We go into audio effects and then bring your EQ 8. And actually this is something I do almost every time I create a pad, is to shave off those lows. So usually anywhere from 220 and down. You can also bring it around 110, but I also like to get rid of those boomy frequencies. So 220 and down is good for me. So I'm like it at +2, but +1 could work. It just depends on the waveform that you have selected on oscillator B. So another trick I like to use to beef up that pad is to go into the MIDI and then duplicate those bass notes. So those are the bottom notes of your chord, right? We also call those the root notes. So I'm going to select the first note, hold the shift key, and then select the others. And then I'm going to hold down Control or Command if you're on Mac. Click and drag down to the next A key. So you notice now we have an A here as well. So that tends to beef up the bottom of your pad. Sometimes we can add an additional layer as well. So we can do 2 layers. An additional layer you can add is to duplicate the 5th. So remember, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this one, essentially the 3rd note in your triad. So notice it's the 3rd note on your triad. Then click and copy down. So that really thickens up your pad. It's up to you if you really want a thick sound. I'm finding it sounding a bit too thick now, so I'm going to remove this note. And maybe the bottom notes as well. And we'll just keep this layer here. So that's pretty much it. I walked you through the basics of writing the chords for a pad, and then we went into Serum to build a pad using a basic shape and then increasing the unison mode and then applying filter envelopes and LFOs. And then finally we added an additional oscillator to add a little more texture to that pad. And then you can also add tricks like duplicating the root notes and bring it octave down, things like that. So that's the basics of creating a pad. There's definitely a lot more where you can make things a little more complex, but having this foundation is important so you can really start to master creating pads. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. And if you like this video, then make sure you share it with your friends and subscribe and keep practicing. And until then, we'll see you at the next video.